Hi, welcome to the Recovery Daily podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abassi, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. I don't know. I hit record and I was like, what am I supposed to say? Anyway, welcome. And to any of you newcomers, welcome. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to have you. Today is something that we do once a month. It's a Reads and Recovery. It's a book review. So every month I provide a book that we read, and then I'll do a review at the end of the month. So the book is usually has something to do with either alcoholism, stroke recovery, that kind of thing. Something about recovery. We're not just reading Stephen King, although that would be fun. Maybe one of the months we will. So this month is My Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolte Taylor. So this book was one that I listened to quite a few months ago. I think towards the beginning of this 10-month period that I left my job and I've been in full-time stroke recovery. And it was one that somebody had told me about. I think I heard about it in a support group or something like that. And so I got it on Audible because that's what I do. I listen to my books, and it was just really good. It was inspiring, and I think it was worth sharing this with you all and hoping that I could get some people to read it, because I think it really is inspiring if you have experienced a stroke, or if you have had a brain injury, vestibular issues, like anything going on up there. Like, it's amazing, this whole idea of neuroplasticity. And this book is where I got introduced to the term neuroplasticity. After I was introduced to it in the book, I see it everywhere. Neuroplasticity everywhere. So it's an interesting concept that I guess is kind of newer, and maybe that's why it's all over the place right now. But she really is an example of how neuroplasticity is capable of healing so much of your damaged brain after a after a stroke. So I'm going to talk about the book a little bit, what I felt about it, the good parts. I don't recall any bad parts. So, and just what my experience was and how it related to some of the stuff that I had been wondering about after I had my stroke, and facing recovery, like this idea that I was thinking about, that I mentioned this after last month's book in the book review, which was, how do you know how hard to work in recovery? And I thought I was the only one who thought that. Like, do you just, I guess if I work really hard, it hurts my head. Like, I'm in a lot of pain. Do I work that hard and experience that pain for no reason and nothing's going to happen? Or do I not even try so that I don't experience pain? Like, this whole, like, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. Thanks to my vestibular therapist, I understand how far to push myself and how to when to hold back. And she's keeping me in that sweet spot for neuroplasticity, which is the less than a 5 out of 10 pain in my head. So anyway, this book provides a view into the unbelievable capabilities of the human brain. And it talks about it from the perspective of a neuroscientist. This is Jill Bolte Taylor. She is an experienced neuroscientist, and she had a massive stroke. So imagine researching something you dedicate your life to researching something, and then you experience the very thing that you've been researching. So this memoir provides a like first-hand detailed story about her journey of recovery, and it focuses mainly on the idea of neuroplasticity. So the book begins with Dr. Taylor's stroke. So she's a Harvard trained brain scientist, and she finds herself experiencing a stroke. And what follows in this part of the book in the beginning is just I was pretty surprised at how she was able to detail her account of the deterioration of her brain over the course of her stroke. And I think it's because of her experience as a neuroscientist that she talks about how she is like aware that she's having a stroke. She's like, oh, this is it. Like, this is fascinating. I'm having a stroke, and it's just like, I didn't know when I had my stroke that I was having a stroke. My husband, he said later on that that's what he thought. The first thing he thought was that I was having a stroke because I couldn't talk. But it never occurred to me that I was having a stroke. And he never said anything to me that I was having a stroke because he didn't want me to freak out. Which he's right. I would have freaked out. Otherwise, I was like, I just can't talk. I can't talk. I don't know why I can't talk. So I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I was just scared. I don't know. But this idea that she was able to observe her experience from the inside of the body instead of watching somebody else, and be able to articulate it so well is fascinating to me. The book takes you through. Now, I don't want to talk too much about exactly what she says and all of these thoughts that cross her mind while she's having the stroke and how she reaches out for help. But she talks about all of that. She was alone when she had the stroke, and she talks about how what she was thinking that she needed to do was challenging, but also to direct her body to do those things was the next challenge. It's surprising. She could have very well not made it through that experience. And then after she talks about the actual stroke, the event, she goes through the subsequent years of her recovery for her cognitive disability and her physical disabilities. She describes this shift in her perception of reality, which is also something that was just introduced to me for the first time in this book. And later, as I've been going down this road of vestibular therapy, I'm hearing a lot more about about how strokes are affecting people's perception of where they are in space, for example. And she also talks about the when the part of her brain, so the left side of her brain, which is responsible for language, logic, analytical thought, just suddenly stops working. So she's relying all on the right side of her brain. And so her entire perception of her relationship with the world around her and her relationship with the universe changes. I think it's great. I think it's such a great book because it really makes you think about more than just the medical part of having a stroke. It made me start thinking about just um the bigger picture about where we are. I'm going to lower my voice because I just realized that I'm being really loud. So she talks about her condition, but she talks about it from the way of the science behind each symptom. So her left hemisphere shuts down, and she describes this peace and this connectedness with the universe. And her right side is now dominant, and this side governs creativity and empathy. And this experience brings her to advocate for finding balance between logic and creativity and the analytical and the emotional parts of the brain. So she had spent her life really relying so much on that logical, analytical side, and having that be shut down and having to solely rely on this creative and emotional side was just very enlightening for her, to say the least. So I think what sets this book apart is so many things. You know, she walks us through this inability to instruct her body to do the things that she needs to do in order to save her life. And then she talks about, as I said, what she was thinking while her body was doing or not doing, doing something else or not doing anything at all. And it makes me think about, I can't help but think about my grandmother. She had a stroke, and I think she had subsequent strokes after the first. Well, I'm quite certain she did. But one time I went to go visit her, and I think I've explained this before, but I can't say it too many times. I went to go visit her, and she was unable to communicate, but she tried to say something to me. And I said, so she was laying down they had a hospital bed like in the home. And she was laying down, and I walked up to the side of her bed, and she looked at me and she said something to me. And I said, "I'm sorry, Grammy, I don't understand what you're saying." And her eyes and her whole body just deflated. And that told me that she understood what I was saying. And what I wish that I would have done then is kept talking to her, because I didn't do that. I was uncomfortable. I was young and I was uncomfortable. I was young. I was in my 20s, I think. And I was uncomfortable. So what I did do is I started petting her hair, like running my hands over her hair. And she closed her eyes like she liked it. And So I do have a regret, and I try to smash that regret because, we do what we can. We do the best that we can with what we know and what we have. So I can't be regretful of that time, but I think about it a lot as I've now had a stroke and I went through that inability to communicate what I was thinking. And yeah, I don't know. It's just meaningful for me. So back to the book, beyond the stroke itself, Dr. Taylor provides an account of this recovery process, and she works so hard at the recovery process. Like her life is recovery, and mine is as well. And I guess if I were to sit down and like write down everything that I do throughout the day, I really am exercising my eyes like every day, all day, doing either the therapy stuff or I'm doing my hobbies. Like I'm constantly practicing. But for me, I don't, I can't tell if I'm getting better or I'm just learning how to manage my symptoms and stop before something hurts too bad. She talks about actual exercise and activities that she does in order to um, rehabilitate the things that she lost. And she talks about how that slowly starts to be gained back, um, which is inspiring. It at the time that I was still trying to figure out what was wrong with my brain, and I'm not sure that I totally know yet, but at that time it was inspiring. It was the right thing to hear at the right time for me, because it helped me to understand that I'm not hopeless. Like there is this neuroplasticity thing, and I will probably be able to, or I might be able to do the things that I can't do again. So she talks about the importance of a support system as well that aided her recovery, and she gives much needed respect and gratitude for those who care for stroke survivors. So I think that this book is great for caregivers as well. She discusses how the recovery process was rebuilding her brain, as it also, the whole experience was really reshaping her personality as well. And so I love the books, like what are they, reading level. It's really easy to read language for a neuroscientist to put all of this into terms that a stroke patient or caregivers would understand, makes it, for me, I think, a necessary read for anyone who has suffered a stroke or cares for a stroke survivor. It's really inspiring, especially at a time when you start feeling a little hopeless, which I certainly did. And I felt hopeless after I read the book, but it's that roller coaster of having hope, not having hope, having hope, not having hope, depending on what's going on, what the doctors are saying, how many tests you're going to, all that stuff. So the author provides practical advice for stroke survivors and their caregivers, again, on ways to facilitate recovery, like actual exercises. She's talking about these cards that she uses and different things that her mother helps her to pronounce and stuff like that. Like crazy hard worker. I mean, I would imagine she is if she was a neuroscientist to begin with, but um, it 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 sorry, it gave me a lot of inspiration, and it made me feel like if I can work hard, I can get better too. And I needed that at that time. Um, for me, I was at a time when I didn't know what I had to work hard at. Um, but that came in time as well. So she uses clear language to explain some pretty complex concepts, but without a scientific background or anything, you can totally grasp it. Um, she talks about what's going on in your brain when you have a stroke, and she talks about what's going on in your brain through recovery. She talks about outside of the whole stroke thing, well, it's not outside the stroke thing, but it's when she starts talking about like the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, and she starts talking about this broader theme of consciousness and interconnectedness of human life. And if you have any interest in that topic, like the universe and everything, she articulates really well this sort of bizarre feeling that she was having due to the shutdown of her left hemisphere and just having to rely on her right hemisphere. Um, our brains need all of the sections in order to make sense of the world around us. And if I if I start going off the rails and thinking about it, it's really bizarre to think about how what we perceive of the world around us is what our brain is constructing, right? It's what our brain is putting together. And I started thinking, like, is the world around us really what we perceive it as? Or is it totally nothing like what I see and I feel? It's just, it's bizarre to me. And that's just this world around me, like this room I'm sitting in. But what about like the universe and all that stuff? So she talks about all that stuff, and I think it's pretty cool. So if anybody has not um, suffered a stroke or brain injury or something like that, it's still a really interesting book. It's worth the read for sure. It's not terribly long from what I recall, but I think it's a page turner for sure. So she also encourages you to think about brain health and your psychological well-being. She talks about living a more balanced and present life. And this really resonates with me or anyone on a sobriety path as well. So I continue to pull these two recoveries together. They are so parallel for me, all of it. Everything seems to like everything seems to merge onto the same path for me, and I'm really grateful for that. So, what did I rate my stroke of insight? I give it 5 paws. So, just like last month's book, I have 5 paws on the recovery redometer scale. So, 5 paws is, do I have that right? Oh no, I think I did that wrong. Anyway, it's an all-time favorite, deeply resonating on a personal level. I think I got my scale wrong. I think it's supposed to be 5 tail wags. Anyway, it was a good book. Too funny. So I think the book is valuable as an educational tool. And I really think it's also a moving narrative about a personal triumph of somebody who nearly died from just a life-altering stroke. I think it's inspiring and it shows the ability of our brains to heal and adapt. And in stroke recovery, our brains still heal and adapt. Um, and with the right care and the right tools, the right education, the right therapy, all of that stuff, it's very much the same as, for me, the way I look at it, as somebody who is recovering from brain damage. It's just, I'm not a doctor. It just seems very relatable for me, is the best I can say. So, yeah, I think that it's a great book and it's worth reading. So that's all I got for you. Sorry about the rating. I don't know. So what I had was on the recovery redometer scale, for your reference, is 1 bark, which is not really engaging but had a couple of interesting moments. 2 wags, which is a pleasant read with some enjoyable parts. 3 woofs, which is engaging and enjoyable and a solid read. And 4 paws, which is, I really love this book and it was hard to put down. And 5 tail wags. So I don't even know what I did last month. I think I have 5 paws and that's totally wrong. So both April's book and March's book are 5 tail wags. So thanks for participating. I will announce next month's book on the 1st, which is the first. Let's look. I've got you here. I'm just going to keep talking. Wednesday. So we have another day, and then I'll announce the book for April, May. So thank you for listening. I truly appreciate it, and I will talk to you tomorrow.